Just wanted to say a quick disclaimer. We are not theologians, pastors, religious teachers, or in any way an authority of the Bible. Just average Christians having a great time talking about the Bible with our friends. Potluck was created to encourage food for thought and to help open a conversation about major and minor topics from the Bible. We strongly encourage all audience members to conduct their own research, as statements presented are largely opinion-based. We here at Potluck wish you a great day, and please, come and join the Potluck.
Welcome to Potluck, the podcast where we bring our different dishes of conversation and perspective to the table. This podcast focuses on a casual conversation about God through personal stories and experiences. We hope that these conversations help in understanding the Bible, God, and each other. We're glad that you've decided to join our conversation. Hello and welcome back to Potluck, the podcast. I'm Danila, and I have a question for you all. We're starting off with Briley this time. What is your favorite fruit?
Oh, easy. Oh, wait. Why that's not as easy as I thought. Okay, either strawberry or peach. They're both good.
Peach. It's definitely not mango since you're allergic.
Well, mangoes are really good, but
Well, I'm Delano, and my favorite fruit might have to be raspberry.
Wow.
If that's even a fruit. I don't know if berries are fruits.
Yes.
I think they are.
Okay.
Most definitely.
My name's Caitlin, and my favorite fruit is cantaloupe.
Ooh.
All right, my name is Vincent, and my favorite fruit has to be the golden kiwi.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'm Darcy. And the first fruit that popped into my mind was mango, but then the second one was also a kiwi. So we're gonna go with two favorite fruits, mango and kiwi.
Nice.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I'm kind of a brother on this, and this was not an easy question. It's gonna be a tie between mango and mame. So
what's mame?
One of them. Oh, you've ever had mame before? Is there an English name for that?
What does it look like?
It's like pink.
Pink?
Yeah, it has like an orange inside, and then like the actual like fruit is pink.
Like guava?
Kinda. No, it's not guava though, but
It sounds like a peach.
it's not a peach. What? Maybe if I can pull it up from here so you guys can
Yeah, you
see
pull it up and I'll say my favorite fruit in the meantime. That's very interesting. I also first thought of mango, and then I realized that star fruit is definitely my favorite.
Wow.
So
I've never had star fruit.
Yeah, I don't think I have either.
What?
Star fruit's really good.
I literally
Now
had
that
it
you
like
brought up
every
star
day for
fruit,
lunch.
have you guys ever had lychee?
Yes.
Yeah,
Actually,
lychee's
no, I
good.
haven't. I've never had
It's like
fresh
the little
lychee.
red. They look like strawberries, but then I don't think they would say they look like strawberries, but sort of. They have the strawberry shape. They have a red little shell on the outside,
Mhm.
and you peel off the skin on the outside and eat the inside.
Is it like a white thing?
Yeah, and it has a little seed in the center.
Yeah, that thing's
Oh
good.
yeah, I have it. Yeah.
Mamma mia,
I've
that's so
seen
good.
people eat it, and I feel like I have eaten it, but I haven't. It looks
Does it
good though.
look dangerous? Like it looks like kind of spiky to eat, but you peel off
Kinda,
the
yeah,
skin
yeah.
part? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like soft. This doesn't spike you at all. There's like
Yeah.
lychee boba. There's lychee juice.
Mhm.
Oh, it's everything. So good.
Yeah,
Lychee's good.
I've tried that stuff, but I haven't tried like the fresh fruit. Okay, Daniel, did you figure it out?
Yeah. But it looks like this.
Oh,
Oh, I have
I've never had that before.
Nope.
It's really sweet, and for me, the taste profile is very similar. Like not the profile, but like the taste of it tastes like cotton candy. I really like.
I'm gonna have
What?
to try that.
What?
It looks like
Yeah.
papaya.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like seeing some
But-
people like there's like a
Instead of 1,000 seeds, it's like one.
yeah, it's just one big one.
You eat
That's
the seed?
insane. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So our topic today is the 10 Commandments. Now, we recorded this before, but it did not work out very well because we were all over the place. We were very excited and eager about the topic, but it was so confusing. I couldn't even understand it. So we're re-recording it with a purpose. We're only doing the first 3 commandments and an introduction about what the 10 commandments is. So guys, what's the 10 commandments?
God's love for humankind.
Yes. That's like rule book.
Yeah.
Basics.
But like where did it come from?
Like, are you saying the reasoning behind why it had to be a thing, or like physically, like where did it come from?
You decide. Either way is great.
Okay.
Okay, let's go with physically, where did it come from?
God's lightning hand.
Okay, so first of all, let's set this. We need to set the scene up.
I think I could take this one.
Okay, here we go, Darcy.
All right, so the 10 Commandments. So basically, when God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt through Moses, they traveled through the wilderness for a while, and then he decided that he needed to write down his law for them. He needed to specifically say what he expected of them. And so Moses went up on a big mountain and
Mount Sinai.
On Mount Sinai. And he was up there for a really long time. It was like 40 days. And while he was there, God was giving him like tons of instructions and things for him to then pass on to the Israelites, like way more than the 10 Commandments. But the thing that most people remember from that, and the thing that was the most like the most memorable from that, was that God physically gave him 10 commandments, which were a set of 10 laws, 10 commandments, 10 rules that were written with God's hand, like his finger, in stone. However, we talked about last time, and the first time we tried to record this, we talked about how those first stones that he gave Moses were like potentially some sort of precious stone.
Sapphire. We
Sapphire.
spent 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes in the last podcast just discussing that the type of stone was sapphire. Now, this is interesting because all the depictions of the 10 Commandments is always in that like clay rock type feel. But we were like researching and we saw that it actually was written in sapphire. And what was the reason for that? Because like blue or sapphire is like the color of the law or something. And it's like it makes sense because God would definitely, like, if he was gonna write in a rock, he was gonna write in a pretty rock, right? Like but then we also discussed like the reason why it's always depicted as like those 2 tablets of like that gray clayish stone is because when Moses came down the mountain and saw that the Israelites were like creating a golden calf out of all their jewelry, they melted their jewelry together to create this golden calf. He got so angry that he like slammed the whole thing down, and it was
Oh, that's right, he broke it. Yeah,
he broke it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the commandments, it was actually the commandments in this nice like sapphire case, but he like broke it, so then he had to carve his own out, and so that's why it's not as pretty.
Talk about a bruh moment.
Right.
Yep, this is why we can't have nice things.
Exactly.
About all of history.
Wait, Daniel, you are looking real confused.
It's the first time I've ever heard any of this, so I'm like, he did what now?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
broke the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Huh.
Out of
But I knew
anger.
he broke them, but I didn't know they were in sapphire. Like that's kind of.
Yeah, the sapphire thing is really interesting.
Yeah, we were researching it last time, and it's like it's something that is briefly mentioned in the Bible, but it is like confirmed through Jewish and Muslim like religion history, that they both agree that it was both written in sapphire, like, and they, when they agree on something, we know it's like, okay, this is true.
It won't happen again.
Exactly. Yeah. So why? So like we kind of talked about how we got them, but I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions on why they were given. I think a lot of people see the 10 commandments as like a restriction. Some people see it as like how we live, a moral guide. Some people see it as this is how I need to get to heaven. So how do we feel about that?
Oh, that's interesting. You said a restriction?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of crazy because I was actually thinking of that earlier today, and it's only 10 of them. I mean, nowadays we live by so many. A section 3.2, like there's so many, right? And because I was kind of thinking like there's no way God expects just the 10. I mean, I feel like laws of conduct and just human interaction kind of goes beyond just 10, but I feel like they all sort of stem back to the original 10, which in a way logical, with the exception of I don't remember exactly how the 10 commandments go, because like for like the Sabbath isn't a one that all of humanity looks or respects, but I don't know, like don't kill, like that's one that everyone does. But there's beyond that, be good to your fellow man and others. Like there's the golden rule, which I don't know if that's part of the 10 commandments or not, but so it's interesting that you say that some people look at it as a limitation. In a sense, I believe that that's only like a baseline.
Yeah.
To way more that is sort of, well, it's not sort of, it is expected of you as just a human being, but then beyond that as a child of God, or in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's
that
how I
makes
look
sense.
at it. Because when I heard a limitation, I'm like, oh, all right, we like energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, growing up in the church, in a church, they're having friends who are like, oh man, I can't go do things on Saturday because I have to respect the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Oh, these 10 commandments, they're so restricting. I've heard that a lot. I felt that a little bit as a kid too, perhaps, but yeah. I mean, like you said, Vince, there's not very many rules, 10, and they're relatively like, they're not like so many little like bylaws and subsections of these 10 rules that it makes it obscene. They're not crazy difficult to respect. They're not easy to always keep either, but it's not like you break one and you're dead either.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it's, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, before I was gonna say, like, I guess like a segue topic could be what is the weight of the 10 commandments? Because God expected us to break. I mean, well, I wouldn't say expected us to break, but He knew we would break them. Because in a way, it's kind of weird to say they're very easily breakable. Like I said, in and of itself is easy. But because I wouldn't say you're not going to heaven if you make mistakes. We're gonna make mistakes, but yet they are pretty solid throughout the Bible. The 10 Commandments is mentioned multiple times, I believe. So
yeah.
But Riley, my bad for
That's fine. I was gonna say something kind of similar because, like, growing up, I've always, like 10 commandments, keep the 10 commandments because, like that's the thing to do because God gave us the 10 commandments and like that's the way to heaven and stuff. I don't know if anyone ever directly told me that the 10 commandments were like the way to heaven, but it was kind of, maybe I just thought of it that way, but it was kind of like pushed that way, I feel like, to some extent. But like the older I've gotten, like I've heard the term salvational issue a lot. And like, oh, well, is it a salvational issue? Then should we bring it up if it's a salvational issue? And then some people define salvational issues as like the 10 commandments, like the 10 commandments. But like, I heard a sermon recently and I liked the way he described it. And he was like, the only sin that'll keep you away from heaven is like completely like rejecting God. Like, and he's like, and even then only God gets to decide who rejects him and to what extent, like if it's an actual continuous rejection of like the Holy Spirit and God and what he wants for you or whatever. And I kind of liked that better than the obey the rules or go to hell kind of vibe, you know? So that makes sense. I feel like I had a point there, but
No, that makes sense. And that was a good
okay.
point. But there is like commandments, like I think it's the fifth commandment where it's like honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land that God had promised you. So there's like there are like commandments where it does make it seem like it is a salvation issue. But I agree. I feel like the impardonable sin, I think that's what's called. We're like we as Adventists believe that that sin is just rejecting God. So like the only way you really don't go to heaven is fully rejecting God, because you just rejected everything that he's about. So like he doesn't want to force you to be with him. So it's not even a situation of, oh, you don't get to come. It's more of a
You don't want to come.
you don't want to come. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see that, but I also see the 10 commandments as also like the least we can do. So whenever I'm thinking about like other situations in our church that we see as like sin or not, I kind of use the 10 commandments as like my guideline of just like, does it compare to these 10 things? The least I can do is follow these 10 things. Everything else is like extra. Like adding things on to like better myself, better my relationship with God, hear him more clearly, which I find is very important to myself and my walk with God personally. But if I don't follow anything else, I just need to follow those 10. That's how I see it.
I kind of like seeing it that way too. It's because like I feel like I don't like thinking of them as more of laws, as more of like they're here to help us to live like a better life. And I feel like if they're almost a gift, God's like, okay, this is how you live the most productive, healthy life. Like, don't do these things. It'll be better for you in the long run. So, and I kind of like that, like, at least do this. So,
Very good point, Briley. Very good point, Briley. And that's kind of what I was gonna say real quick was like some of the commandments, especially towards the end, are thou shalt not, which are like don't do this. But I feel like the earlier ones are more for us. Or maybe I'm not remembering them correctly. But for example, the one with the keep the seventh day, I keep hearing the Sabbath was made for us. We weren't made for this. It was made for us to rest. It's almost like we're entitled to a day of rest from divinity. Almost, it's kind of cool. But I don't think it's a game over if you don't.
Yeah,
sort of a deal. Maybe that's just my opinion on it, but that's kind of how the Ten Commandments are. In at the end of the day, they're made for us. So I guess they can be a little restrictive, but in a sense, like don't kill. But if you have a tendency to kill, maybe you are a problem.
Well, I think maybe the restrictive, like the feeling that it could be restrictive, is the way that some people will like bash this over your heads, like parents, maybe parents who don't even really deserve respect will be like, oh, you better honor us because the Bible says you have to. And then obviously we know people really bash the Sabbath over people's heads sometimes. But when you really just like read them, like they're kind of just showing you how to be a basically decent person. Like an obvious one is you should not murder. Like that's pretty freaking obvious to help us live a better life. Don't kill yourself.
Oh my gosh, guys.
Don't commit adultery. Like these are things that may seem good in the short run, but they're just gonna like bite you in the butt in the future. So by not doing those things, you're living a better life. And not coveting, like if you covet things, you're not going to be happy with what you have. You're never going to be happy with what you have. And then like just honoring your father and mother, respecting your neighbor, not lying about them. Like these are things that will help us live in harmony with each other, which again, that will make us happier. So maybe they've been twisted to seem restrictive, and also since we tend to want to do things that are bad for us, they can seem restrictive in that respect as well. But definitely, when you just kind of look at them as at face value, you can see how doing these are actually so much better for your health, like mental health, happiness in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jesus was crucified, it's written in the Bible that he kind of fulfilled the law. And a lot of people like to think that means that, oh, the Old Testament laws are done with, and it's only 2 now. But truly, the 2 that is referring to, which is love God and love your neighbors as yourself, that's essentially what all the 10 original 10 commandments boil down to: 2 things: love God and love your neighbor as you would love yourself. Those 2 things, everything else falls under. So
Mm-hmm.
like everybody's been saying, it's really just a guide on how to live together with each other happily and fruitfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like overall the Ten Commandments kind of like very similar to what Danila said. It's very much like for me it's like the bare minimum of what I could do. So when I read the Ten Commandments and I look at it like just as kind of like rules to follow, right? I'm sitting there going like, I think Vincent touched on this part a little bit. Like, really, that's it. That's a solid way of living your life. You gotta if you can do those things, you're gonna have a good time on this earth. So when I also try to think about like the context of like why God did it, and I was just like, the Israelites kept messing up like a lot.
Yeah.
And they literally just saw God commit acts of miracles and wrath and everything, and they were like, "Yeah, golden calf, that one." But I mean, it's really easy to bash them because like that was like a long time ago, and they also got to see those things of God. But for us, like I would say we're also kind of in that range of like general stupidity, where if you look at a lot of those laws, you can think in your head of not only yourself but other people that you know that have broken at least one a lot. So yeah, so like we're no better as a generation, or like even as a different like what is it called, the different time or different time period. We're not any better. Like the main was like, thou shalt not have any gods before you, right? Or before me. We have like a lot of things that we would probably consider, not, we wouldn't say it ourselves that these are like our gods, right? But like we treat it like it's our God, we worship it like it's our God, and we do a lot of things like it is our God. So there's a lot of these rules that, yeah, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. You're like, oh yeah, sure, I love you, Jesus, but you have like, for some example, for me, like video games, like, oh my God, sometimes I put that over God, and that's not okay. So that becomes my God essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of people, like a different aspect, there could be like football, soccer, makeup, different types of hobbies or things that people enjoy. Like it's very easy to put that above God because that's something you're doing and like doing. So there's different ways to see these rules and also be like, I can use the rules that God set for the Israelites to apply to my life, and I will have a really happy life. Like if I don't commit adultery, pretty sure I'm gonna have a happy life. If I don't murder anybody, I think life's gonna be a lot easier that way, you know? So, and I don't know, there's other religions, each religion has, kind of like a day off a week. But I just know if I did not have the Sabbath, I'm pretty sure I'd be bald, probably laying down in the grave somewhere because
Oh man.
I'd be dead. There's no way. You kidding
No,
me? I'd
100%
be
agree.
like, yeah, I
Yeah.
would be done for if I didn't have the Sabbath. So I don't know. At least through my life, I can say that following the Ten Commandments is a very good idea and a very good blessing to have. So it's not just an old rule or restriction. You follow it because you think you're gonna have a happy life. And so far, and I think most Christians would tell you, following those rules, you're gonna have a pretty decent life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually you brought up something very interesting that I wanted to bring up before we start reading through the Ten Commandments, but the uniqueness of the Ten Commandments. With other religions, like while I was researching some stuff about the Ten Commandments before we started this podcast, what's really unique about the Ten Commandments versus other religion and other religions' rules when it comes to their God is that very few of them actually have to do with God. Like the first three has to do with how we treat God. The rest of them are just like how we treat each other. So I think that's super huge because even the first three, it's not like, okay, so every Wednesday you have to light this candle and say 3 prayers, and like it's not that specific. Like even the laws, and we're about to get into them, even the laws that does have to do with like worshiping God and how he wants to be worshiped, it's not like a specific time, day, situation. It's just an overall, hey, I don't like to have images made of me. So it's like a basic understanding of that, which I feel like is kind of nice to have. But as humans, we of course add and put more pressure onto the very simple 10 commandments. And we have, like Darcy mentioned, adult figures in our life sometimes can put more pressure onto the 10 commandments. Us individually can put more pressure onto the 10 commandments and stuff like that. But let's start reading it. Caitlin, do you want to start us off?
You ready?
Where are the 10 Commandments found again?
Exodus 20.
Such a bad Christian.
And somewhere else too, right? Exodus 20 and then like Deuteronomy 10. There's 2 places in the Bible.
You said Exodus what?
20.
Okay. So just read the first one, right?
Yeah.
And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me.
There you go. That's the first one. The first commandment: do not have any other gods before me. Now, Daniel already started tackling that earlier with talking about video games and how we could put other gods other objects or things above God. But how do we feel about this commandment?
It can be tricky to like interpret that for like a personal like interpretation of that, because back then it was like, okay, don't make a golden calf, but they made a golden calf. But nowadays it's like it's more tricky to identify what we ourselves could or could not make an idol.
So making an idol is the second commandment. So do not make yourself an idol is the second commandment. But the first commandment is just talking about
putting the gods before you.
Yeah. Other
right.
gods.
I guess I just kind of always associated the two as having gods and idols before God.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're tied in a lot of ways.
What was that?
I just said they're kind of tied in a lot of ways. Like they are different because the first one is more like don't worship an entity or a thing or whatever above me. The second is like don't make an image of anything or even of me and worship that image. But I don't know. They're pretty similar. So I do the same thing in my head. I'm like, oh wait, no, they're actually 2 different things.
Okay, I see.
So whenever I think about this commandment, I normally think about like what Daniel was saying with the video games and stuff like that. But how, I don't know. I feel like it's more of a don't put another like actual God, like another religion God, or like, but then again, I feel like what he said, like you could put video games in front of God, but how do we know when something is in place of God? Like, is it when we said we're gonna pray to God and then instead we hang out with our friend? But like, or like, you know what I mean? Because it's like, I feel like we can try our best to live a balanced life and not do too much of any one thing. But how do we know when something's become a god? Is it when we start replacing that our god time with that thing? Like, I don't know.
I mean, it definitely, like, at least for me, it's it takes a lot of like self-evaluation to figure that out. For me, it's like, oh, I am the time that I had spent with God, and the time that I was, and like just thinking about what I would do in my free time, and not even just for my own comfort and stuff, I would go to video games. Like, I would, anything that I could have had God be like helpful for, I would have switched with video games. And I'm not saying video games because like that's like, you know, a universal thing. That was just like something particular to me at a certain time in my life. So like, anytime I needed comfort, video games. Anytime I needed to psychologically distress, video games. Anytime I needed to like just stay away from people, video games. Like, it wasn't like I didn't have time for God because I put video games above him. That's a very, it doesn't also have to do like, oh, you changed times. Like, you know, like you did your favorite hobby and then you also still spend time with God. I don't think that's like really replacing him. I think it's like, instead of having a conversation, developing a relationship with God, and like focusing on and having that time with him, you use something else for that. Like, you are basically replacing God as your support system with something else. So I think that's how I've seen it. And personally, I think it does take a lot of self-evaluation to do that. So not everyone might have the same methods that I do. So, you know, like some people might think that replacing God with something else is, you know, maybe it is changing a different time or having a different mindset. I don't know. I think it's up to the person, but you know.
Yeah, self-evaluation is a big thing for talking to someone who you can't see, because part of that is understanding how much time that you're giving to, or how much thought, as opposed to time, that you're giving to your relationship with God.
My grandma always placed a big emphasis on like spending time with God and making sure that we didn't spend more time with anything else over God. Like, if we spent more time with TV, friends, anything more than the time we spent with God, it was like putting things above God. And I think that came from her own anxieties about like not knowing or how to identify with that verse necessarily. But I think that's a good way. Daniel put it in a good way to think about it, instead of like worrying so much about it like she did. Like, it was like a constant. And like, I remember at one point I was thinking, like, when I was little, I was like, well, what if I don't want to spend all my time with God? And my grandma was like, you shouldn't want that. Like, she was like scared for my like soul. She was like, you shouldn't want to do anything but be with God. Like, that's the end goal. That's how you like reach perfection. It's like spending all your time constantly with God. Like, she cut out watching, she used to watch like soap operas with her mom, and she cut out watching those at lunchtime because she was like, okay, it's becoming an idol because I want to do it every day at lunchtime. I had a point with that. I can't necessarily remember that now, but I think that makes sense. I think it is really difficult, like self-identifying and self-evaluating how God wants you to fit in with that verse.
Yeah. This whole topic I'm thinking a lot about, which is why I'm not saying much, because when we're kids, like, parents and teachers have to find a simple way of explaining these things to us, explaining this commandment to us. So that's where you have, like, I feel like explanations of like, all right, you have to like spend time with God every morning. Make sure you spend at least 5 minutes time with God. And then kind of the way Daniela, you described, you asked just for the heck of it at the beginning, of like, so what does this commandment mean? Does it mean that if you said you would pray to God later, and instead of praying to God you go see your friend, is that you breaking the commandment? And I feel like in my head I was thinking of Uncle Arthur's bedtime stories, which for the people who are listening is like a series of stories that were written in like the, I don't know, mid 1900s, I don't know, really, maybe like 1980s or something like that. But it's all like stories for kids, teaching kids Christian morals and things like that, and it's all very simplified and like watered down so that a kid could understand it. And I think trying to put trying to explain what is breaking this commandment and what is not breaking this commandment as a universal thing for everybody feels like those bedtime stories. It feels like those simplistic rules that we give children. I like what Daniel said about evaluating and figuring out what it is for you that is your quote unquote God. Where are you personally feeling that you're compromising with God and like putting other things above him? The only reason that I also hesitate with that perspective is because it can also be easy to just drop this issue and like give people no guidance at all and say, oh, however you keep this commandment is completely up to you. So it's like you have to find some sort of middle ground. I feel like definitely pastors, their job would be more to explain this commandment a little bit more and like how people keep it and how they break it. But then I also don't think it's the same for everybody. Yeah, I was rambling a little bit there, but that's yeah, I think it's a tough topic to say a blanket answer for everybody.
I vibed with what you said because I feel like that's very true. I feel that way about a lot of rules in our church. Is very watered down, and I feel like it can help us by not breaking rules, I guess, but it also stops growth also because we get so stuck in like the childhood, you have to pray all the time, to let's talk to God all the time. It becomes like more of a rehearsal versus a actual conversation connection. And so yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. That reminds me of that. It's a verse somewhere, and it was like God was kind of upset with the Israelites, and he was like, you guys are doing what I say, like you're doing like the sacrifices and everything, you're doing everything, like you're following all the rules, but your heart's not in it. Like you're just following the rules to follow the rules. You're not trying to have a relationship with me. And I feel like it's sometimes it's easier to just like follow the rules instead of like really looking at yourself and being like evaluating yourself and having a relationship with God, because it can be like, oh, I'm following all the rules, so I have a relationship with God, and that's not necessarily the same thing.
And I think this commandment, this first one, to put God first and not have any other gods ahead of him, I think this is the most important one to actually genuinely follow, because I think everything, and there's a reason it's the first commandment, by genuinely pursuing God and trying to put him first in our lives, the other commandments will come easier for us, I believe.
Good point. Yeah.
When there's something that you want to do, you're gonna find out more about it and learn it more, like a hobby or like higher education. People spend 4 years in higher education just to become a doctor, or no, plus 4 years plus just to become a doctor. But if you truly want to be a better person, or if you truly want to live life to the best that you can, the best place that I found that is through belief in God. And through my belief in God, which has been something I've had since a child, I've found the things that are being said in the Ten Commandments have been slowly being revealed to me and becoming more understood, just because I've had that basis of I believe in God and He is what I believe.
Love that. All right, are you ready for the second commandment? Okay, let's hear it, Caitlin.
You shall not make for yourselves a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments.
Okay, let's get into this, because this is a controversial one, especially within our own religion. As Caitlin just read, it clearly said, do not carve an image or make an image. I can't remember everything you said, but if you walk into any Christian church, for the most part, you'll see images. So how do we feel about like art versus idol?
Mm-hmm. This is funny because we have two artists in the chat and multiple other people who do art. So
there's a lot of creatives in the chat. Yeah.
We have at least 3 people that majored in art in the chat. We have one currently painting as we are talking right now. So yeah, there's a lot of artists in here right now.
Yeah.
Okay. I not think of what I was gonna say, so hopefully this is gonna make sense. But I think obviously I'm for art in the church. I'm one of the artists in this chat. In this podcast. So I'm definitely for art in the church. I'm not for art in the church that becomes something you physically bow down to or like worship in any way. But I believe that God is a God of beauty. God is a creator himself. He exercised his artistic talents in creating this world, creating the universe. And I think following in his footsteps is one of my favorite things about being a creative person, and also just being a human, because he created humans to create and to be creative. So by creating art, like I believe that is what we're to do. And I think creating art for the church to make the church beautiful is a good thing, but it crosses a line when you then start worshiping what you created.
Okay. Actually, I want to take the advantage of the amount of creatives in this space right now. How do you guys feel about or do you ever feel pressure when creating art, Christian art, that you might just misrepresent misrepresent God, what he looks like, because that's happened a lot throughout history, or or misrepresent like God's purpose, or like any pressure with that. Also, we could also talk about how God has been misrepresented
case in point being the fact that I am referred to many, many times as Jesus, but even though I'm a white man
with long hair.
Yes.
I will say I don't usually make Christian art. And when I do make quote unquote Christian art, I don't usually draw Jesus. I have drawn him. There's one painting I can think of that I did, but I made it a very colorful, like more abstract painting. So I didn't even like assign him a race. I just had any man, any race, whatever. And I made it abstract because I didn't even want to go into detail about like, I don't know. I try to avoid it, honestly. I try to avoid painting Jesus, not because of something I believe that's bad about doing it, but I just I don't know. It is a little intimidating, I think. You don't want to alienate anybody when you depict Jesus. You don't want to offend anybody. And I also, just being who he is, want to do him justice. Nobody knows what he looked like. I don't know. Like, for me, it's just not something that it's not something that I ever really want to do, but I don't believe like you shouldn't paint Jesus. I don't think it's wrong to do.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I don't know if I've ever created a piece of Christian art, but I wouldn't say that my Christian values don't come through my art. And I think as an artist who is a Christian, that should be the goal more so than making something that feels like you're preaching at people. I'm not a preacher if I'm an artist, you know?
Right.
And the most jurisdiction that I have to speak on stuff is my own personal experience. So that is what me as a Christian artist try to represent. But I, as a Christian artist, try to represent. I'm not hating on people who do paint pictures of Jesus or paint the stereotypical Christian art. I think I just have a better way of connecting to people without beating them over the head with something that's already been beat to death.
Right.
Yeah. I feel the same way. That's like, I've never really either created specifically Christian art, and it's not really because of that commandment, but it's just like the worry of like, oh, I might misrepresent something, I might like do something wrong, and like you don't personally, I don't really want to mess with that. If I'm like, I don't think I can even come close to representing God in any way that like is worthy of him. So I'm like, why even try? Mm-hmm. And also like, but that doesn't mean that you're not, as an artist, that doesn't mean, like Delana was saying, that your values as a Christian can't come through in your art. Mm-hmm. So
I agree. I think there is a place for Christian art for sure. Like, keep painting stories, keep painting the second coming, like all that good stuff. But it personally doesn't speak to me, and it doesn't speak to me, then I'm probably not gonna paint it or draw it. Whatever speaks to me will speak to the specific audience that I make art for, maybe in a better way than other Christian art would. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What?
But
oh, sorry, Janila, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Some of the peak Christian art, in my opinion, would be like C.S. Lewis's like Chronicles of Narnia, or even J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. Both of them are Christians who created art that wasn't innately and right up front Christian, but their values ring through. They come through, even though it's not something that's ever been exclusively spelled out for their audiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're kind of straying away from the commandment. Sounds like we do need to do a podcast about Christian art. We've got a lot to say, but the commandment, how do we feel about it? Like, how do we feel about crosses, necklaces, tattoos of God, like Jesus, like statues in homes surrounded by candles, like I like more of like an idol vibe.
When one thing becomes when a item takes the place of your God, then it becomes the God. So it kind of goes back to the first commandment. Mm-hmm. So I think it almost depends sometimes. Like, if you could have a cross necklace that when you see it or when you hold it, it reminds you to think of God, then I think it's different than, oh, this metal cross that I have on my cabinet, surrounded by candles, is what I go to pray to every day, and I can't pray unless I'm with that.
But let's use the example of the Israelites, right? So Moses walks down the mountain, and what are they doing? They created a golden calf, but they didn't do it to recognize another God. They did it to remind them of God. Like they did it for, am I wrong? Well, I see a lot of confused faces.
I think what I remember is they were like, let's make this golden image and worship it. And they were like, it brought us out of Egypt. And that's one of the reasons why God was so upset, because he was like, guys, I just did, like, I did that. You know, I did that.
Like the ocean, guys. What the heck?
They made it. Wait, go ahead, Darcy.
I was just gonna say, the way I understand the story is that they did do it to represent God, to give him a physical form, because that's in Egypt, that's how they represented their gods. They were like, let's be like the Egyptians and represent our God as a physical form. And yeah, I think God, even though they did it and they were like, oh yeah, this reminds us of God, this is the physical image of God, so they were still like technically believing in like the God that brought them out of Egypt. I mean, they can find him to an image of first of all, an animal. I feel like that's kind of offensive to God, to just like say, this is this animal that you created, now this is you, this is a representation of you. They also kind of like, I don't know, when you try to put God in something physical, I think it's almost like you are limiting God. You're putting God in a cage. You're making him small, something that you can control, something you can understand. I think that's the danger of like creating a graven image, something that you see as God, something that you worship. That's not God. God is so much power. God is so much love. God is so much more than we can fathom. I think that's one of the dangers and one of the reasons why he so strongly says, like, don't even create an image of me, like that you.
Let's read it real quick. It's in Exodus 32, right? So it's a golden calf. So basically, first verse, Moses delayed coming down the mountain, and the people gathered, and Aaron is like, come, make us gods so that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up and out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And so then Aaron, which I didn't realize he was the one that was the instigator of all of this, he's like, break off the golden earrings which are on your ears, on your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. And so then they created the mold and molded the calf. And then they said, this is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. When Aaron saw it, he built an altar and said, tomorrow is the feast to the Lord. Then they rose early the next day and brought peace offerings and sat it down and worshipped it. Then the Lord said to Moses, go down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf, and they worshipped it and sacrificed it, and said, this is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Interesting. Now they're before me. Let my wrath against them not turn against them, and I may consume them, and I will make. So yeah, I feel like it was, I don't know, from reading that, I feel like it was the way that me and Darcy was describing it. Like they were trying to create it to be God, and so they made it to like look like them. But then God later on in that same chapter, doesn't he tell them to make a serpent or a snake in like, so he asked them to have a reminder of him. So how do we feel about that? Because he tells them to mold something in an image as a reminder.
Reminder versus replacement. They started worshiping the calf instead of God.
No, they're worshiping the calf as God.
Yes, but they weren't worshiping the serpent.
All he
The
asked
difference there is, wait, what, Darcy?
all he asked them to do was look at it.
Yeah.
And didn't he have them destroy that after, like, because they started like worshiping him, like we have to. Am I remembering that wrong? I thought
I can't read the whole chapter right now, but but yeah, I just remembered that just now, and I remembered like, oh, he did, but I guess it wasn't in his image, and they weren't worshiping the image itself, so I guess, yeah. Anyway, kind of went sidetracked again. Okay, you guys ready for the third commandment? Anything else about the second one? All right.
Okay. I have to go back because I was reading along with you.
Okay.
Okay. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain.
Delano's got great ideas on this one.
Okay, Delano, I'm excited. What are your ideas?
This is the don't take the Lord's name in vain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people take this as meaning to not say like, oh my God, you know. I grew up thinking that. I was never allowed to say that. And I still don't really choose to say that. You know, if you have something that you keep as sacred or holy, then why would you use it as a exclamation? Honestly, even then. But yeah, essentially, from what I gathered from a class that I took, which was about
Christian beliefs.
Christian beliefs, yeah. The professor was talking about how this this commandment is talking more so as representing the name of God as something that's inaccurate to God's will. So, say a pastor is preaching about how adultery is evil and adultery is a sin, but simultaneously he's out cheating on multiple people's wives. This man is
Okay, I think the example would be more like people like who do mass murder in the name of Jesus.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more like that. Like there's a difference between being what's the word?
A hypocrite.
A hypocrite, yeah, versus this commandment. Because this commandment is specifically like doing something in the name of Christ that is wrong.
Like,
well, I mean, taking his name in vain.
That's why I specifically mentioned a preacher, because they're the face of God. Like your pastor is the face of the church.
Yeah, it could be, but like everyone sins, even pastors.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that would be necessarily breaking that commandment. It would be just breaking the adultery commandment. But actively saying like, God wants you guys to drink this poison, that is taking God's name in vain. Because God did not ask you, like, you know, like, unless no, God did not ask us to do that. So when someone's like manipulating people into thinking that what they're saying out of their mouth is like truth, when it is nowhere near the truth, because at least in your example, what the pastor was saying was truth.
Okay.
Like, you're not supposed to commit adultery, and he was being a hypocrite. But I think this commandment is specifically talking about using his name for power almost.
Yeah. Like if you were
way.
like if you were taking donations for the church and then you stole all that money, that'd be taking God's name in vain.
Yeah.
Cults.
No,
not really.
Just like in general, cults.
It needs to be, well, I mean, maybe to a certain no, not really. Because it's more,
that would more be like lying. Do not lie.
Yeah, but I mean, you're saying, oh, God is going to use this money to rebuild a new church, and then you take that money and you go buy a car with it.
it's more like when you're like teaching your kids or something and saying that God will literally strike you down if you do not put your toys away right now. Like, God never said anything about that in the Bible. You know what I mean? Like, actively saying something against God's teaching is taking his name in vain. Like, you can lie about what God says and be like, or be confused. But when like again, like mass murder in God's name.
Yeah, and perhaps a less dramatic example, like saying, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, so I hate this specific person because they do this.
Yes.
Being like, God told me we have to get married.
Yeah, that would be like taking his name in vain. Yeah, but also lying. So all of them also like correlate, I guess. But I also like the original idea of it, or not the original, but the one I was raised with, is just saying his name. That always confused me because I'm not allowed to say, oh my God, but I'm allowed to say, oh Lord, my God. Like, I was like, wait, so what context are we allowed to say it? Because why is it wrong here? And as I grow older, I realized that it wasn't about necessarily the phrase, but like my mom always used to say, that's my name, don't wear it out. And just making sure that like for her name, she's like, I would be like, mom. She's like, okay, that's my name, don't wear it out. It's more of just like respecting his name for what his name is, and knowing that that name actually holds power, and a reminder to not overuse it. So I feel like that commandment can also correlate with that, because in some like Christian or Judaic, or what is the word, religions that follow the Bible, some people don't even agree with saying God's name ever. And when they write it down, it's very particular. Like, I know in the Jewish religion, it's like that. So I feel like there is a level of power and importance that we need to make sure that we don't just use his name willy-nilly. But yeah, that's how I feel about that one.
That's a good word, willy-nilly. But I agree. I think it needs to be overall a respect name, and we like to get hung up on like simple little things that we can teach children and teach other people to do easily. Like, don't say oh my God, or don't say oh my gosh. That's a lot easier to say, to explain to somebody, than to maybe go into depth over like, don't do bad things in God's name, don't misrepresent him in this way. But it's a commandment that goes a lot deeper than just oh my God.
Children are smarter than we give them credit. I think we all need to start explaining deep concepts to children.
Yes and no. But that's a whole other topic. Okay, so let's wrap it up. So what is the relevancy of all of this? Like, what is the relevancy of the commandments? How can, like, why do we even follow it today? Like, why is this even important?
To live and lead a successful life, an example of what Christians should be, which is helpful and loving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard it like said that I think we talked about it before, but it was like the first couple commandments are like man's service to God, and like the last ones are man's service to man. Like the 10 commandments are really there to like help us get along with God and get along with like our fellow man, and just like help us out.
Mm-hmm.
God knows we need help.
Yeah. Like, I think a lot of times in our like society, it's hard for us to see the relevancy of the 10 Commandments, because a lot of our society today, of us living in America, it's a lot of it's already, the 10 Commandments are already pretty much a part of our law, our everyday law. Like, if you kill someone, that's really bad. Like, you can go to jail. So and things like that. I can't wait till we get to like later on verses or commandments like do not lie, because our Christian society has made that not a bad thing, because they called it white lies and then said, oh, they rebranded it. So I can't wait to talk about that later on. But as for these first three, I feel like it's amazing how God took our worship towards him and made like a bare minimum little pamphlet version, and was like, okay, don't make an image, don't do these things. And so I feel like they're relevant for us to know how to worship, and also know that our God is not demanding, because he doesn't require every minute of every day. He just requires us to respect him, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. It was all those things.
All right.
Wait, sorry, one last thing.
Yeah, of course.
Requires to respect him, but he also wants us to have relationship with him. And I think these first three especially pave the way for that to be able to happen.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay. Any other final thoughts? Because we talked about a lot. We talked about so much. I don't even know if we could really like summarize it, but I like the conversation we had about art. I like the conversations that we had about how we treat each other and God, and how we respect him, and how we need to move past our childhood ideas about God and grow deeper every day. And that's what's so exciting about God to me, is like constantly learning new things. Some of us learned some new things in this conversation today, so I love that. I love that we are constantly growing and learning, and I'm so glad that I can do it with friends. All right, so with that, bye.
Bye.
Oh, this is a long one.